Hey brothers and sisters, how you doing? Today we're going to talk about using your earned sick leave. Now if you want more information after we're done with this thing, look at Article 10.5 of the contract and the ELM, the Employee Labor Relations Manual, Section 513 for more information. Now we're talking about using your sick leave. CCAs don't earn sick leave, they only earn annual leave, so this doesn't pertain to CCAs. And this is not about your attendance with the Postal Service. Reminder that the ELM 665.41 does require employees to be regular in attendance, and employees not regular in attendance may face disciplinary action, including removal from the Postal Service. So, of course, you have to maintain your regular attendance. However, if you want to use your sick leave, you should be able to. So the first thing we want to talk about is accumulating your sick leave. You earn 1 hour, everybody, no matter what your seniority is, you earn 1 hour for every 20 hours of work. That adds up to 4 hours per pay period. If you work a full schedule, 104 hours per year, which is 13 days total per calendar year. The use of sick leave is to protect you against loss of pay if you're incapacitated for the performance of your duties because of illness, injury, pregnancy, and confinement, and medical examination or treatment, okay? So first thing, medical appointments. Medical appointments are done in advance. You fill out a 3971, PS Form 3971 in advance, and the reason for the medical appointment, under the ELM, they have conditions for authorization. And what it says is, if the absence is necessary during the employee's regular scheduled tour. And they're talking about medical appointments. So if you want to plan that once a year physical on the day after the holiday, make sure you get that approved in advance. The other thing, the next reason to use your sick leave is for illness. Now, illnesses are not in advance, but we still use the 3971. It's still the control document. That's still the form that you fill out to request absence upon your return. And it is also addressed in the ELM. Request for sick leave is made in writing in duplicate on a PS Form 3971. So make sure you do that upon your return. Now, sometimes medical documentation is going to be required, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. Medical documentation is listed up on the screen. You can see what is defined as medical documentation from your physician. It also says that your supervisor may accept substantiation other than medical documentation if they believe it supports the approval of the sick leave request. Now, when is medical documentation required? For periods of absences with 3 days or less, supervisors may accept the employee's statement explaining the absence. And then it goes on to explain about medical documentation. Now, you will always need to provide medical documentation if you're on restricted sick leave. And you can see all of the criteria up there for restricted sick leave. There's a whole bunch of things that management must go through to put an employee on restricted sick leave, review of your attendance, 3972, etc. The main thing is that when you are put on restricted sick leave, the supervisor has to provide written notice to the employee that they're on restricted sick leave, and thus any absence that they have for illness has to be substantiated by medical documentation. Okay, the other time when you have to submit medical documentation is for an absence of more than 3 days. Absence is excess of 3 days. So more than 3 days, you will have to submit medical documentation. Now, the term that we hear a lot in relation to using your sick leave is the term deems desirable. There's no such thing as a deems desirable list. There's no such thing as putting all the carriers on deems desirable or anything like that. However, the language from deems desirable does come from the ELM, and it talks about when the supervisor deems documentation desirable for the protection of the interests of the Postal Service. Now, that is pertaining to a specific circumstance, pertaining to your absence. So if you're absent on a particular day, you call in, and the Postal Service deems desirable for some reason to protect their interests, they have to identify what that reason is. Now, we hear a lot of crazy things about someone being on deems desirable. It's not because you have bad attendance. Because if you're on bad attendance, the Postal Service has to go through the restricted sick leave process. And if you didn't get anything in writing, then they didn't go through the restricted sick leave process. It's not for what they like to call a pattern of calling in the day after or before your NS day. That's silly. You have 2 NS days during the week. There's only 7 days. The majority of your days are either a day after or a day before your NS day. There's no such thing as putting all employees on a deemed desirable list, and it can't be because it just happens to be a specific day on the calendar. Like, everybody's on the deemed desirable list tomorrow because the Super Bowl is on Sunday, and on Monday we think you're all going to call in. That is not allowed. Now, what are some examples of when deemed desirable or the Postal Service may cite that provision? I can think of a few. There could be an outbreak of tuberculosis. They say, hey, we want to protect the interests of the Postal Service. Please provide documentation. You put in for a request for annual leave and it's denied. And then all of a sudden, you call in sick. They may think that there's some fraud going on and they want to protect the interests of the Postal Service. You come to work, you look fine. All of a sudden, you drop the route and you say you're ill. They may ask for medical documentation in that case to protect the interests of the Postal Service. If every single year, when it's your birthday, you call off and say you're sick, the Postal Service may have a reason to protect its interests and request documentation. And of course, everyone's favorite, when you have your pictures up on Facebook, you're on a nice cruise, but you call in and say you're sick, the Postal Service may have reason to protect its interests and ask you for documentation. But other than that, if there's no interest to protect, if there's no reason to protect its interests, it's not an absence of more than 3 days, and you're not on restricted sick leave, you should be able to use your earned sick leave. So brothers and sisters, if you have to miss work due to illness or injury, please return to work, fill out your 3971, and if it's disapproved inappropriately, seek counsel from your union steward to get that corrected. Thank you. This has been a tutorial from NELC Region 3 on using your earned sick leave.